Wow, that was quick. We've already got one person in here. Four. Jesus. Introduce yourselves. How you going, guys? I can't remember. I can't see who it is. So drop your name and anything in the chat. Hello, Kevin. How are you? Congratulations on getting your solo diving ticket, mate. Very well done. It's something that's on my bucket list to do. Get a diving ticket. More like haven't got changed out of my work clothes. No Coopers, but uh, surprisingly, I don't mind a ice cold can of VB every now and then, Jason. Um, as many people will probably find shocking because I'm a home brewer and a bit of a craft beer snob. But after a hard day, there's nothing better than an ice cold VB, I'll tell you. Uh, now, Jason, I don't see your name on any of the questions that people have asked tonight. Do you have any questions that you would like to have addressed about Nutrien Export tonight? Oh, that sounds really good, Kev. That's yeah, awesome. Are you going to take some video? Have you got a GoPro that you can take with you? Nah, nah, Rob. It's just the audio was a little bit shit the last couple of times, so I thought I'd use a headset and a microphone to try and get a little bit better audio. But yeah, back when I used to game, this used to be in my headset. Hmm. How is everybody tonight? Did everybody have the did everybody have the exhausting week that I did? Ah, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's fair enough, I suppose. Okay. But you'll be able to after you get your solo diving ticket, you'll be able to do as many videos as you like. So that's pretty cool. I've had to change location from the garage to my kitchen or my dining area tonight because it's too damn hot, and the garage is a bit of a mess. So I'm just getting everything ready for Christmas, and got home brewing stuff everywhere, and it's just a mess. So apart from it being stifling hot in there, I thought it better to have it out here tonight. That way, if it gets too hot, I can just put it on the aircon. So win-win. Ah, welcome, Steve. Well, that's good to hear. I've spent the last 3 weeks 3D modelling. So, yeah, I've got RSI in my wrist. which is great. But fun anyway. Yeah, I understand that, Kev. It's to be able to go where you want and do what you want and with who you want to go with um, would have significant advantages. I'm hearing you there. Oh, what did I do? Oh, I've done something here. I had all the questions already up and I've clicked off them twice like an idiot. Okay, here we go. Oh, we've got some salmon hatchery upgrades in Tasmania that we're doing for the same company, but at two separate sites. Um, they are upgrading their aging um, smolt systems. So, for anyone that doesn't know, smolt are what they call pre-sea cage salmon, essentially, up to a certain size. Smolt usually range up to about 500 grams, but they have another another term called a super smolt, which is up to 1 to 1.5 kilos that they've now found. Putting them out in sea cages that size has significant flow-on effects for growth, and they can cut down their growth by keeping them on land in systems for that period of time in freshwater, which is obviously an advantage. Cutting down their growth time as well as putting hardier stock out into the sea cages. So they have some aging systems that are probably 20 years old up there, and we're putting a side loop treatment system on to boost their water clarity through mechanical filtration via a drum screen filter, and also their biological filtration capacity for their carrying to boost their carrying capacity. So that loop is 5,000 litres a minute in both of those circumstances. So quite a big drum filter and about 12 to 15 cubic metres of moving web media, which should boost their carrying capacity significantly. That's the room that they had to work with anyway. Yeah, so that's the 3D modelling those, and then we've got a university that we're doing some research systems on, some large tanks, and also some rack systems. So I've been 3D modeling those. Been pretty interesting. Like the rack systems they've got three different slab levels, and each of them have the same filtration, but they're hooked up to heat pumps. It's spaghetti. It's really fun to do. And then a live shellfish holding facility. So they take mussels and oysters and harvest them, and then they bring them in and they hold them for a day 48 hours, something like that, and it purges them out a little bit. But just holding them for that 24 to 48 hours intermittently between taking them off the boat and then sending them to sale improves the quality dramatically. So we've been working on a system to do that that's got removable tanks that they can just forklift on and forklift off, and it's got a recirculating system with foam fractionator, biological filtration, all that kind of nifty stuff. So, and obviously with 3D modeling, you do one thing and then they go, oh, can we do this? And so it's got to change. And oh, can we do this? And so it's got to change. And then, what they didn't want to do before, they actually realize, oh, wait, maybe we can do it that way. So you go through a few iterations, up to maybe iteration 2, 3, 4, maybe on these for various changes that we're looking at. But the advantage is obviously being that by 3D modeling it, there's very little unknown when you get to site, especially if you're modeling off architectural drawings and site drawings if they're outside. and then site photos, site inspections in some cases. Tasmania obviously a little bit tricky, but we've got architectural drawings of both indoor and outdoor. So it removes all of the questions. 99% of the problems that could potentially happen on site are almost immediately eliminated because you know exactly what you're walking into, and you know how to deal with what you've got on hand by putting it in a 3D model and getting it in front of you. Also, with the salmon hatcheries, we're putting a lot of piping underground. So we're getting pipe spools made out of polypropylene. So that allows us to actually say this is the exact length we need each of these bits to be. We need flanges welded on here to attach to the pumps and things like that, and everything can be pre-made. That can then be shipped to the customer. The customer can excavate the site and put the plumbing in. And by the time we get there, all that we've got to do is put in the hardware and connect it up to the already buried pipe. There's no mucking around. So it's incredibly useful and incredibly valuable. Yeah, well, drawing on graph paper is is a thing of the past these days. So I use SketchUp, but I also have AutoCAD to take customers' 3D files that they have in Rhino or AutoCAD or any of those, and I then can convert them to a format that SketchUp will recognize. SketchUp recognizes some formats, but not all 3D modeling program formats. So I've got to import it into AutoCAD and then throw it into SketchUp. And yeah, SketchUp is very powerful, but it's also probably a program that's more at my level of 3D modeling at the moment. Um, so I can produce an incredibly accurate 3D model, but it's obviously not up to the standard that maybe AutoCAD is. But also, I don't need the standard of AutoCAD for what we do. We're not building and modeling a product. We've already got the products in. We just import them in and then model out and essentially lay out the design. We're not, 3D modeling up an intricate clockwork mechanism or anything like that that hasn't been made before. So, why in the hobby protein skimmer and why in commercial foam fractionation? Foam fractionation is the process, or a foam fractionator performs foam fractionation. So, foam fractionation is the process in which foam fractionates out waste from water. You've probably heard similar terms in distillation of fuel and alcohol, talking about fractions or fractionation of different products. Where in distillation of fuel or alcohol, within a column you will fractionate out, or taking your fractions out of different products, so methanol, ethanol, or different qualities of fuel, and then diesel first, and then different qualities of fuel as the purity goes up and up and up. So foam fractionation is essentially the injection of foam into a column to fractionate out what you don't want and keep what you do want, or the majority of what you do want. A protein skimmer is just a more simple way of saying a thing that skims off protein, when in fact the same process in hobbyist terms is called foam fractionation. The process that you're achieving is foam fractionation. It's just a protein skimmer essentially says exactly what the product is doing. It's skimming protein, when in fact it's actually doing more than that. It's skimming dissolved and micron wastes. It's removing fats and all sorts of bacteria and all sorts of different stuff, not just protein, but essentially it's just simplifying the process and the term, essentially. You have a mate that specialises in pipe and ducting for factories. It was fascinating, his description of the bacon factory. Um, is there a joke there that I'm missing, Phil? by all means, guys, if you haven't shared this with your friends and invited them, or your fishy friends, obviously, Paul and myself and everyone else in the industry really wants this group to thrive and improve and grow. So if you are a member of any societies like cichlid societies, aquarium Facebook page groups, anything like that, and you think that people might like to come along to stuff like this, share the event. Just click on the event, copy the event in the URL on the top, paste it into that group. Obviously, get your admin's approval first. We don't want to be seen as getting you guys to spam this kind of stuff. Um, but it's good for the industry. It's good for everyone, and helps us all learn. So if you are members of groups like that, please, go and invite people. It's not too late to even invite them tonight because we're still only warming up. So we're kicking off at 8. So what's been going on, Phil? Is business good? The aquarium maintenance business still kicking along in Queensland for you? Hey, Jason, hello. Yes, that is a real Christmas tree behind me. The smell makes me sneeze, but Gemma really likes the smell and the feel of the real Christmas tree, so I put up with it for a month. I like the feel of it too. It's just yeah, it's not too bad. It's just my hay fever. Okay, so you're saying that a pig goes in a pipe, Phil? Like, is that the the correlation here between the guy that does piping and ducting systems? He described to you a pig going into a pipe at one end, and out the other end it came out as pieces of pig. Oh, that's no good to hear, Phil. Well, look, if I hear of anyone looking to get into that sort of thing, I'll uh, I'll let them know. Yeah, been established for a very long time, and you obviously have a very big book of clientele, so it would be a budding business for anyone who wanted to get into that. I have found though, if you withhold the water a little bit from the Christmas tree, it doesn't smell as much. So if you keep them really healthy, it's almost a salting on the nostrils, but yeah, it's not too bad. Like I can't even smell it here at the moment. That's probably because my nose is blocked. But when isn't it? But yeah. Uh, I really wish Facebook Live would show exactly who's here. It would be really useful to know. Hey Brett, how you going? Your pallet left today, by the way, mate. Um, the only thing left is there's the air tube and the pumps, the two pumps, one for the frack and the other one for the supply for the frack. So they should be in any day, hopefully, and I'll just shoot those out when they come, as we talked about. But yeah, left today on a pallet, all wrapped up, nice and snug. So I should be in Sydney by Monday, I would think. Oh, see. Yes, I've been doing, oh God, the amount of pipes that I've seen 3D modeling this last 3 weeks is ridiculous. Like that 5,000 litre a minute process circuit for the smalt systems. That's 225 mil up to the drum filter, and then it expands out to 400 mil, 400 millimeter pipe to go into the drum filter, and then out of the drum filter is 400 millimeter as well into the biofilters, and then 400 mil all the way back to the sump. Big pipe. When you're talking about 400 mil, I mean you're talking about a 6 meter length weighing about, I don't know, 80 kilos or something like that, maybe even more. It's a big pipe, really big pipe. Like 11 kilowatt pump to run this thing, you know. So, hey, hello, Matt. Great to see you this afternoon. Well, obviously no one would know, Matt actually dropped in this afternoon to Pure Aquatics and said hello. We finally got to catch up. Talked about his clownfish breeding setup and stuff like that. It was fantastic to see you, Matt. I've got to say, from the pictures that Matt showed me, and even the description of like his diet regime that he feeds his fish. Anyone who's buying Matt's fish, or you know, is questioning whether they should buy Matt's fish, I can tell you right now, from what I heard and from what I've seen in the pictures that he showed me, I do mean to get down there. It's only in Foster. It's only a couple of hours away. But from what he told me and from what I've seen, these fish are very well taken care of. And anyone, I think, would be more than impressed with the quality of his fish. So yeah, it's I wouldn't hesitate if you're on the fence. I would say try them out. How are Lindsay and Ryan? Yeah, good. We're incredibly busy at the moment. Jason, as you know, we're doing the other systems over at the uni, and yeah, we're flat out. We've just put closed in the extension on the factory, so manufacturing will have an extra bay. So Mick is actually, I'm not sure whether you met Mick, but Mick is busy at the moment fabricating up a very large plastic storage stand for all our HDPE and PVC, so for our CNC router and all our plastic fabrication. So we're busy doing that at the moment, and then we've got to close in half the shed, which will allow us to put more pallet racking up. And then, smile, darling, you're on camera. And then we will have a lot more room to put pallet racking in and things like that. So, and maybe not so much noise from the CNC router coming through to the office, which, you know, that screaming whir is, you know, definitely makes my day, but I won't miss it. Hello, Zoe. Great to see you. How is Bundaberg? I see that your corals are nice and happy and spawning. Yeah, Phil. I mean, I could, as big as my head is, and I've got a pretty fat head. I reckon I could probably fit my head in that 400 mil pipe. We'll manufacture reactors and stuff out of it. Like we buy lengths of it and manufacture reactors and different filters and oxygen and ozone reactors and things out of it. So it's tough stuff too. Oh, what's everyone sipping on tonight? What are we sampling? Where is Paul Talbot? That's what I want to know. The man isn't here. I haven't seen John Bailey on here for the last couple either. I wonder what he's been doing. I know he's been busy. Matt, you probably weren't here when I mentioned it, but anyone who's got a business page or is a member of other Facebook groups or anything related to aquariums, please feel free to share not only the group but also this live stream, even tonight. Paul and myself, and I'm sure everyone else within the industry that's a part of this page, really wants this page to grow and really wants to get this educational stuff out there that we're doing, that Paul and myself are doing, and I hope other people will take up on as well for different subjects and different parts of the industry. So, yeah, if you do have a business Facebook page or any of the other pages that you might be a member of, obviously clear it with admin first, as I said, but feel free to post it up there. We want to get this out to as many people as possible so it gets in front of as many people as possible to benefit our industry. So, yeah, feel free to grab that. If you just go to the live stream, even this live stream now, this live video, or the event live stream, if in the future it hasn't been done, just copy the URL and paste it into whatever page it is that you're advertising it on, and people will be able to make their way here. No, it's not, Jason. The largest unit they make currently is a TM4, which will do 70,000 litres an hour, I think. And then they have a TM5, which I think will do up to 120,000 litres an hour, which is 120,000 litres an hour is 2,000 litres a minute. The drum filter that we chose for this application is the other drum filter company we represent here in Australasia, in Australia and New Zealand, called NP Innovations. And the owner of NP Innovations, Nils, was actually the creator of the drum filter and the owner and director of Hydrotech, which was the first drum screen filter ever to make it onto the market. Now, Hydrotech's gone through many owners and is currently owned by Veolia Water. But he then started NP and has put a lot of different innovations into the way drum filters are built, the parts that go into them. He's got a lot of different features that he's put into them, which make them very good. So this is actually this will be a stainless steel unit because it's on cold water, fresh water. But they are incredibly good units. We put a couple in now. We're putting two down in Tasmania, as I said. We've put one up in at the Barramundi Discovery Centre in the Gulf of Carpentaria, which they're very happy with. We put one up at Proserpine at a prawn broodstock holding facility that they're also very happy with. They're a brilliant drum filter. Brilliant drum filter. I've got no question of their quality. But yeah, big drum filter. You saw me with the indigestion, did you? Yeah. No, yeah, it's... my back's out as well. I haven't been to the osteo for a while, so probably, ribs pushing on something. Hello, Reese. How are you? Hello, Max. How you going? Good to see you, mate. Reese, did I see you ask a question or not? No, you didn't ask a question. Do you have any questions? You've got 6 minutes to get it in before I start the live stream for your question to be answered before we jump into any of the subjects that I've got listed out for tonight. The good thing is that a lot of these subjects have been touched on or gone into detail even in other live streams as well. So if people have been watching the other live streams and they're now watching this, you'll have a leg up. If you find that there's maybe not as much information as you think and you're not quite understanding what I'm putting across tonight, at any point at all when it comes to it, when I'm following up a subject or going over some subject matter, I'll attempt to remember where where I covered that in other live streams, so you can go back and watch it. And no, I still haven't got my ass into gear and uploaded those videos to a YouTube channel yet, but I will. I will. I do need to get a better webcam, probably a better headset and microphone, depending on how the audio comes across tonight. So that might be a next year thing, because I've got a few things in the works. I've actually been talking to David from First Time Reefer about a little bit as well that we're looking to do. There might be a little bit of fun. So yeah, stay tuned. I'm always well, Reese, apart from when I'm not, but at this point I'm good. You could open a new tab, go to Facebook, go to the future of the Australian aquatic industry, and then copy just the event description and put that in there, and at least then people will follow it to the page and they'll be able to find the live stream that's popped up on the Facebook page, the live feed. So yeah. Yeah, look, Reese, we live in a digital society now. As much as it opens up a lot of as much as it opens up a lot of security questions, but we do live in a digital society, so people are consuming that media at an alarming rate. So yeah, it makes sense to capitalize on that. I was only talking to one of my colleagues, actually the guy I supervise at work, and he said that last night he was looking at different things and trying to find stuff on YouTube, and the videos he was watching were like 7, 8, 10 years old. They'd had 30 million views, but there's nothing since. Like, no one's putting out information on that sort of stuff, which there's obviously a big gap there that people are wanting to consume that information, and it's not readily available to people. So yeah. Oh, sweet. Thanks, guys. Awesome. We might get a few people coming along. That's good. Might have to refill the beverage here in a minute before we start. Oh, Phil's even tagged me, the good bloke. Hey, thanks, man. Beautiful. You have a lot of fishy friends on your Facebook page, so maybe we'll get some people along. I've had about 2 drinks all week, and that beer just tastes wonderful. It's amazing how not having a drink through the week makes the beer at the end of the week taste so much better. 9 people. Again, I don't trust the live counter, but only because I can't see who's there, and it bounces around all the time. And all right, we've got 1 minute. I'm just going to go and get a refill. Stand by, talk amongst yourselves. Christmas tree crashing down then. Right, let's get hydrated. Everyone enjoying a Friday afternoon beverage, I hope? Way too much salt and pepper squid for dinner. I'm paying for it now. On the plus side, over the past week, I have dropped 1.5 kilos, so that's good. All right, so it's 8:01. Let's crack into it. Hopefully, more people will be along soon. So, as always, the people who have been so kind to give some suggestions for questions, I will answer those questions first. Then we will jump into the list or the agenda of the stuff that I put up, the topics that I'm going to talk about. And obviously, if anyone has questions along the way, I do keep an eye on the chat, so feel free to throw up any questions in regards to one, what I'm talking about at that point in time, or secondly, anything that you might want to know about if you suddenly have a brainwave, and I'll do my best to answer it. So, Tim Lamb, who was actually one of my old customers at Hunter Pets, funnily enough, when I managed the aquatic section down there. I do believe he lives in Queensland now. Also has a sausage dog, best dog in the world. He asked the age-old question about best, fastest, and safest way to get rid of nitrate. Well, the fastest and safest way to get rid of nitrate is to do a water change. But is it the best way? No, because you're going to be using a lot of water, and because nitrate is produced constantly, you would constantly be doing water changes at a far higher rate than you would just to do a maintenance water change of 10 to 20% a week, or whatever it might be that you do. Best way, there is no best way to get rid of it, because with each system comes its pros and it has both its pros and cons. Obviously, the most ideal way is to get rid of it in such a manner that doesn't require a lot of input of resources. So that can be, that's obviously organic ways of getting rid of it or biological ways of getting rid of it, whether that's breakdown through the use of bacteria, whether that's absorption through the use of algae or anything like that. Obviously, then you have absorption medias and stuff like that, which I'll cover later on as well. They can be fast, but they cost a lot of money. Depends on how fast you want to get rid of it, what the purposes of getting rid of it is going to be an intermittent export of nutrient, or is it going to be ongoing, which in most cases it will be ongoing. So, how long's a piece of string, essentially? Look, Tim or anyone, and I was having this conversation with Matt this afternoon. My phone number is on the website, on the Pure Aquatics website. Feel free to call me if you have a question. If I can't answer it, or I think there's someone else that can better answer it, I'll put you onto them, but I will take my time to help you as much as I can. When someone asks me what's the best, safest, or fastest way to get rid of nitrate, the first thing I'll ask is, what does your system currently entail? Or if you're building a system, how are you building it? And I will then use that information to find out the better or the more suitable way to approach a certain process, in this instance, nitrate removal. So I'll get into organic carbon driven nitrate reduction later on, which can be passive within the system, and it can also be augmented by adding more organic carbon to the system. I'll get into that. But there is a certain amount of nitrate that you can remove organically, biologically, by the system itself without having to add anything, as long as you set it up properly. And then obviously you have Obviously, if you have elevated levels of nitrate, you then need to augment that process more, or put another system in to take up the slack. We'll talk about that more. But best, fastest, and safest way. I hope I've answered that question. I don't know if I have well enough or not. But yeah, there is no best way. There's definitely fastest and safest, but there is no best. Um, Julian always likes to throw me the hairy questions. Badger asks, what nitrate and phosphate levels should we aim for depending on the type of marine aquarium we are keeping? Okay, so fish only. My argument would be, people would say, oh, don't worry about nutrient export, it's only a fish only tank. My argument would be, do you like the look of algae, like nuisance algae in your fish only tank? No. So you should, in some way, shape, or form, be controlling nitrate and phosphate. Probably the easiest way is just a intermittent dose of organic carbon, or running a biopellet reactor or something like that, something that's going to sort of take care of itself. Maybe a refugium, if you didn't mind lighting that refugium, of course. However, electricity on an LED lights could be more power efficient than organic carbon, depending on whether or not you want to run a refugium or not. There is a certain amount of maintenance that's involved with that. So fish only, I would say nitrate levels below 10 to 20 parts per million, phosphate levels below 3, and that will generally keep most stuff under control, especially if you have fish that are turning up the substrate and things like that. If you really don't want any problems, obviously you're going to aim for lower than that. LPS, it will depend on the LPS, but generally speaking, they can handle a higher amount of nutrient. If you're looking at Darwin corals in particular, they live in nitrate and phosphate rich, turbid, silted up toilet water. They just not that bad, but they do. They can handle huge extremes in temperature, huge extremes in silt. I mean, I've talked to guys that collect zoanthids up there, and they say they're digging through like silt and sponge that's a foot thick to get to these zoanthids, and they're still alive and have beautiful colours and stuff. Um, so in that case, if you had a tank just of Northern Territory corals, you might find that they, can handle nitrate and phosphate levels for LPS, nitrate levels above 5 parts per million and phosphate levels above 1. For normal LPS, I'd be aiming more towards the 0.5 to 0.8, 0.5 to 1 phosphate, and maybe 1 to 5 parts per million nitrate. If we're talking about SPS, or keeping very ultra low nutrient systems, obviously those levels come down to like 0.2 to 0.3 phosphate and 0.5 to 1 parts per million nitrate. Obviously, you do then obviously need to balance your carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, or your Redfield ratio, because your corals are photosynthesizing still with zooxanthellae algae. When you're in an ultra low nutrient system, though, they are feeding a lot more heterotrophically, so they are feeding on plankton a lot more. So it's very important that you feed your coral a lot more. And obviously, with the reduction in zooxanthellae, if you want ultra high coloration in your coral, you don't want them to what's termed brown out or get duller through the golden brown zooxanthellae actually taking over the pigmentation of the coral. You want to run ultra low nutrient and feed them more, so that means you want to keep your nutrient low to enhance your colours. Obviously, that's a double-edged knife, as anyone would know, that keeps ultra low nutrient systems, or has seen ultra low nutrient systems, and how they can be a faded pastel colour or whether they can be a vibrant colour. There is a balance to strike there. And obviously there are then exceptions to the rule where people have amazing colour and their nitrate and phosphate is off the charts. They're unicorns. All good, all power to you for having high nutrient levels and being able to boast that you've got brilliant colours. But at the end of the day, it's a happy accident. You're lucky. It's a unicorn. It's not the norm. Let's just move on. So it's not, it's not. I'm not speculating here. This is science, and it's been well proven through application many times over. So they're about the levels, but you are going to to experience some way out of there. And again, it's all how your tank runs as well. Dan Rigel, who I'm not sure whether you guys have heard of or not in the US, did a lot of cultured corals, was really into it back in the day when cultured corals first came on the scene, really, when people were fragging. Um, what he does is he runs an ultra low nutrient system and he waits until his nitrate and phosphate get really, really low, and then he feeds heavily until he gets up in nitrate and phosphate, and then he doesn't feed until it comes down, and then he feeds again until it comes up, and then he doesn't feed until it comes down. And what that allows him to do is nurture both coloration and zooxanthellae simultaneously, and it also allows him a way to monitor and meter the rates at which he feeds. So that's an interesting concept and way that you can approach it as well. Julian then asks, what is better for waste export using an algae filter? Refugium versus algae reactor. Okay, so algae reactors definitely have an advantage in that they maintain the microalgae within a reactor that is easily serviced, has a lot of light immediately available to it, doesn't doesn't experience diffusion of light, so a lot of wasted light. You don't get a lot of waste build up in there like you would with a refugium that has a bottom that doesn't, self clean well, or has substrate in it that will clog with detritus over time. Um, so as long as they're sized properly, if I'm speaking purely from a labour and maintenance point of perspective, an alga reactor would be my choice, simply because it has nowhere near the amount of work, and it's a lot more compact. It does cost a lot more to set up though, so you pay for convenience and arguably probably a little bit better performance out of it because the light is immediately available to it in a very small area. You don't get a lot of light leakage, as I said. Having said that, the process is exactly the same. It's using photosynthesis to remove nitrate and phosphate as part of a growth and cellular division process in macroalgae. So, yeah, if we're speaking purely from that point of view, reactor, I would say, for a labour perspective. However, I would very confidently say that you would not have the abundance of zooplankton production in a algae reactor that you would in a refugium that has substrate and a lot more available detritus for food for these zooplankton and things like that. So it's all about what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve a environment where you have not only nitrate and phosphate removal, but you also have a lot of zooplankton production, a refugium would be the way to go. If you're only looking for nitrate and phosphate removal and you artificially feed your coral and you're not worried about copepods and rotifers and all that kind of junk, a reactor would be potentially better for you. But as long as they're sized correctly, either one will work for nutrient export. It's all about what you want to achieve over and above that, as long as they're sized correctly. Is there a size limit to a refugium while we're on it, Reese? No, there isn't. But there is a size limit to the amount of macro you can grow in regards to the amount of nitrate and phosphate you are producing and the amount of space that it will then take up. A good rule of thumb that I have seen work in, I'm going to say 80 to 90% of the circumstances that I've seen refugiums applied into that follow this rule, is a 20% volume of your refugium. Have a refugium that's 20% of the volume of your display aquarium. So if you've got a 100 litre display aquarium, have a 20 litre refugium. Okay, small amount of substrate in the bottom, the rest of it is room for macroalgae to grow. Obviously, you want to maximize width and length and minimize height so that you can get maximum light penetration down to the lower levels, fast growing, things like that. But then you need more light. It's all about dimensioning. But if you follow that 20% rule, you should be pretty well on the money. you might have to take up a little bit of slack here and there. But yeah, generally speaking, 80 to 90% of the applications I've seen follow that rule have been very successful without actually having to have extra nutrient removal such as GFO, which a lot of people run with their refugiums. And do you know why people run GFO with their refugiums? It's because nitrate is very easily absorbed, phosphate is absorbed at a much lower rate compared to nitrate, so you get a glut of phosphate that isn't taken up by the refugium because it simply can't process that amount, and you then have to get rid of it, so you need to run GFO. It's not that you have to run GFO with a refugium, that's not the case at all. It's not that a refugium requires you to run GFO, it's just that refugium hasn't been sized correctly or is too small. So 20%. So yeah, you're over your 20%. So I would say, unless you're going to go with crazy stocking densities and feed rates, that you should be able to run a refugium without the use of GFO as long as you have the right light, as long as you nurture that, as long as you maintain that refugium. I would say that you're going to be very successful in controlling your nitrate and phosphate without having to really touch anything in regards to absorption media like GFO. That's my gut feel. Julian then asks, what happens when nutrients get too low? Can nutrient export become a problem? Well, yes, as I went over with browning out or pastel colours, if you're not then feeding in ultra low nutrient system, yes, you can run into problems. You can also burn your coral with your light if your light's too intense. Often that really happens with metal halides, but it can happen with lights that are heavy on the UV spectrum as well. Um, without the protection of their zooxanthellae, they become weak essentially, and without the protection again of their zooxanthellae and a weaker coral, they can succumb to harm, as well as pests and things like that as well. Just like us, we get stressed out. Like I've been stressed out after being back at work after 14 weeks off parental leave. I ended up getting tonsillitis. I haven't had tonsillitis in years. So yeah, same thing. Yeah, Reese, I reckon you should be sweet. No dramas about that. Daniel has said that recently he came across an article by Billy Smith on mixing vitamins, fatty acids, and amino acids with pellet food to increase fish growth, immunity, and color. The article suggests a mixture of vitality, fuel, garlic guard, Vitachem, zooplankton, and phytoplankton. I was wondering if you experienced such diet and what your opinion on it is. My first advice would be vitamins and amino acids. You need to make sure that you have fresh stuff and that you keep it in the fridge because once they oxidize, they're useless. So you need to make sure that no oxygen gets to them and that you keep them cold once you've opened them. Make sure you're getting good use by dates on them too. Secondly, I'm not going to comment on garlic or garlic guard or any of the other garlic supplements because there has been studies that have shown that liver damage can result from using garlic in fish, in some fish. I will say though, for finicky eaters, it is very very useful if you're only going to be using it intermittently. Even for getting aquaculture fish um, to get them back onto a feed that's palatable after you've added antibiotics to the feed or something like that as an antibiotic treatment under the supervision of a vet. Sometimes they'll recommend oral ingestion of antibiotics. So sometimes using garlic extract, crushing up garlic and things like that can be useful for that. But I will say that a varied diet is very important, and making sure that your fish get the right amount of amino acids and vitamins and quality food is very, very important. Um, Depending on the fish, I don't know whether phytoplankton is going to be overly useful, except for if they're ingesting it by proxy. Obviously, anything contained within that phytoplankton will then be digested, but normal fish wouldn't usually go after phytoplankton themselves. They're more of a zooplankton feeder, unless of course they're a herbivore, but in that case they wouldn't particularly be going after phytoplankton anyway, because as a larval fish they would probably be feeding on zooplankton anyway, and then moving on to more vegetative diet later on. Paul Talbot asks, what nutrients do each type of algae, such as cyano, prefer? Well, they all need nitrate and phosphate to reproduce, apart from cyanobacteria, which are also photosynthetic. So they'll store nitrate and phosphate within their cell structure for periods of low food, but they'll also photosynthesize as a means of producing energy and food for themselves as well. So they're a bit of a bastard like that. Bryopsis will feed directly from the substrate water interface, so that's why you commonly see them growing on rocks and on substrate. It's because even in a very ultra low nutrient system, they'll get the phosphate as it's coming out of the calcium carbonate when it's diffusing back out into a lower concentration environment as it's being removed. It also, when it creates that mat, you'll notice that if you ever had bryopsis, with bryopsis that is well established, if you rip that off, it sort of comes off in a carpet, and it's almost like a layer of soil underneath. It'll actually, my theory is it captures microparticles and lays them down, and that breaks down over time, and it will actually process the nitrate and phosphate that's being released from that being broken down. It's a bastard of a thing. But thankfully there's treatments now that don't involve increasing your pH like I used to do and wrote blog posts about it, or increasing magnesium or anything like that. So there's bulletproof treatments like Fluco, I think it is. It's very, very useful. But in essence, all algae needs nitrate and phosphate and a certain amount of carbon to reproduce, just like microalgae do, like our nano and chlorella and things like that we feed to our rotifers, and phytoplankton we feed to our tanks. So yeah, some of them will prefer certain levels of one nutrient compared to another, but at the end of the day, they all need nitrate and phosphate. Nutrient export is very important in freshwater systems too, Max says. He didn't have any upcoming questions on top of that. However, you will often see people running plants in a separate tank or in a refugium style of filter in their freshwater tanks, and it is a very successful way of removing nitrate and phosphate from your freshwater aquarium as well. So yeah, don't discount it. Plants, they're very good, incredibly useful. So I am going to go to our agenda now and have a look at what our list of things is. Okay, so first up we have nutrient types and impacts on closed aquatic systems. So nutrient types, in a nutshell, is anything that can break down into things that we don't want in there, would be a way of describing nutrient. So that's total suspended solids, so feces that comes out of fish, uneaten food, broken down algae, things of that nature. So, and then it can be nitrate and phosphate, which phosphate is directly released from food, and it is also directly released from fish. It then breaks down out of feces that isn't currently phosphate, but as the waste gets broken down, it turns into phosphate. Nitrate obviously is nitrified by the process of biological filtration and nitrification, which we've been over. So nutrients can be in the form of solid or dissolved waste that haven't fully broken down into nitrate and phosphate by biological means, or it can be those broken down nutrients such as nitrate and phosphate as well. You could argue that organic carbon is a nutrient as well, considering that does also come from food, and it is also required by heterotrophic organisms and photosynthetic organisms to to survive. But organic carbon's a bit of a, yeah, you can become organic carbon limited very easily. Not so much with nitrate and phosphate. So yeah, it's that's really the crux of it. So anything that goes in must come out, and if it doesn't, it's going to build up, and it may potentially cause you problems in the future. And that's predominantly food that goes in. It can also be amino acids. They're a most simplest form of nitrogen if you're adding amino acids to your system as well. So the nutrient sources in the aquatic environment, as I said, mainly food. It can also be algae that grows, nuisance algae or decorative algae that grows within your system, that will that can become dislodged, break down, and re-release into the system, which arguably grew from the food and the nutrient that you're putting in. But yeah, it's another source. The one thing that a lot of people don't actually realize is photosynthetic organisms like corals do actually produce metabolites through the process of photosynthesis if they're not, even if they're not fed actively with a prepared food. So by using nitrate and phosphate within the system, they will then produce a metabolite that then comes out as a waste product that then needs to be broken down. So people that go, I haven't got any fish in my system, so I don't need any nitrate and phosphate removal because I don't feed my coral, that's bull plop. You'll eventually get nitrate and phosphate elevated in your system. There's no way to get around it. So that's another source that people do not consider that they need to. So with all of the inputs and production of nutrient, namely nitrate and phosphate, which is what we're talking about at the moment, but other nutrient sources which we've been over and how to get rid of them. We will go over how to get rid of them. So how are they utilised within the aquatic environment? So nitrate and phosphate is obviously used in photosynthesis. Nitrate and phosphate is also required by organisms for cellular respiration and reproduction. Heterotrophic bacteria, as we've talked about in the probiotic stream, need organic carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus to incorporate into their cell structure in an aerobic process to make more cells. Yeah? It's the same with any other heterotrophic organism. Fish, me, you, cats, dogs. Heterotrophic organisms that take in organic matter and derive energy from that. Nitrifying bacteria use phosphorus to incorporate into their cell structure for their respiration as well. So they use phosphorus within their system. Then you've got all sorts of macro animals and micro animals and things like that do use nitrogen and phosphorus, or not necessarily nitrate, but nitrogen and phosphorus for their cellular respiration. Now, that's only obviously a portion of the amount that you're removing. So you have a circumstance where you're producing much more than is what is actually required for respiration of your organisms within your system that you then need to get rid of. So, how do you get rid of it? So the types of nutrient export in an aquatic system. First of all is mechanical filtration. So remove it before it gets the chance to break down into other forms of waste that can then be broken down eventually into nitrate and phosphate. So mechanical filtration is your primary removal mechanism. Filter sock, filter mat, further on down the line obviously being protein skimmer or foam fractionator. That will remove an alarming amount of nutrient, especially in the sub 30 micron range or sub 50 micron range. That will remove a hell of a lot more before it can get the chance to be biologically broken down into either ammonia for the process of nitrification to become nitrate, or into phosphorus or organophosphate or anything like that that's going to contribute to your phosphorus or phosphate levels within your aquarium. Then after that, obviously your nutrient export, obviously starting with ammonia, is then nitrified. That was a huge crack of thunder. Is obviously nitrified into nitrate, which is where your nitrate comes from. and phosphate is obviously broken down into phosphate there. Your potential for export for those particular two compounds of nutrient of nitrate and phosphate is highly varied. So it could be organic carbon driven. It could be a refugium, which is algae driven. It could be an algae turf scrubber. It could be absorption media. It could be water changes, algae reactors, anything like that. Okay, so the issue is that nitrate will continue to build up in the system if it's not actively removed, and phosphate will continue to build up into the system until it gets to the point where it gets to a saturation level, which from my experience is usually about 3 to 5 parts per million, at which point it's then going to soak into anything made of calcium carbonate within your system. And unfortunately, all of our substrate in a marine aquarium and all of our live rock is made of calcium carbonate or calcium carbonate type products like calcite and things like that. Big problem, because that then becomes a phosphate bank. And what happens is the phosphate builds up to a certain level, if it's not controlled, and then it soaks into the calcium carbonate. And then it builds up more, it soaks into the calcium carbonate, and so on and so forth. It continues to happen until obviously then you go, I've got an algae problem. Oh, this isn't good. And then you start to actively remove that phosphate, and you go, oh, great. I tested my phosphate. It's down from 3 parts per million to 0.5. Awesome. You come back the next day, it's back up to 4. You go, what the hell's happened here? Well, there's been that much phosphate in the water that your phosphate absorption media has saturated itself really quickly, or even over 2 days or 5 days or whatever, saturated itself really quickly. And then that phosphate that is in the rock now has an environment outside of it, being water, which is at a low concentration. And so that phosphate comes out, diffuses out of that calcium carbonate, that substrate, and that live rock, into the water column, requiring more removal. In this case, if you have substrate loaded rock, in my experience, and I've done it several times where I've tried to remediate live rock and coral sand from phosphate loading, my advice would be replace the live rock completely, and probably the substrate as well. You'll have to do it slowly, but it's a much less expensive, much less painful process to do that than it is to try and remove the built-up phosphate within your system. It's a headache, honestly. It's a gigantic headache. So this is where we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the stream. I know it seemed like we covered those first couple of subjects fairly quickly, but there's not a lot of bones really in them. Where we sort of go into the deep dive now is the intricacies of each individual nutrient export system. And as I said, nutrient export can be in the form of BOD or biological oxygen demand. It can be in the form of total suspended solids, which comes from your mechanical filtration, as we've talked about. And they are all valid nutrients that need to be exported, and all things that need to come out. But for the process, for the purposes of the following information, when I refer to nutrient, I'm only referring to nitrate and phosphate, unless I say otherwise. Okay. So, refugiums, which I know a lot of guys run, and they're very popular, and I'll get onto algae reactors afterwards, but refugiums are very, not old technology, but they're established technology, I should say. So, refugiums are a place where a refugium is a place where you can house your macroalgae and a variety of other environmental structure within there to proliferate life such as copepods, rotifers, anything like that. But primarily it acts as a sink for the absorption of nitrate and phosphate via your macroalgae, I should say. So Caloepora, which is not allowed in many states now, Chaeto or Chaetomorpha, however you like to pronounce it, is the more popular one. Often they'll spin that or in a refugium, or they'll put it in an algae reactor. The advantage of this is that you can do sequential harvesting. So you do still need to make sure it's sized correctly. So as I said, that sort of before, that sort of 20% of your display volume is a solid number to work with. Obviously, if you need more, you might need to use more. If you've got a higher fish load or a higher feed load in your system, you have the requirements for your macroalgae, not only for nitrate and phosphate, but you have to remember that you're growing a plant as well. So, macroalgae and refugium-based aquarium systems do require a metric shitload of iron. You will just soak up the iron with a refugium. Now, if you're having trouble maintaining colours in your greens and your coral, especially your SPS, and you have a refugium, I would bank on the fact that, one, you don't dose iron, and secondly, that your iron is very low, or or you dose iron, but you're not dosing enough to meet the demand of the macroalgae, and then have a reserve for your coral as well of iron. And iron's very important for coral. It's very important element for coral growth. So, if we're talking about increasing the effectiveness of a refugium, dosing iron would be the number one thing I would recommend that you do. Test iron first, obviously, but then dose it, and you will notice that the health of your refugium will increase dramatically. As I said, the advantages of a refugium, apart from developing a lot of zooplankton growth, as well as, you can also run a deep sand bed in there if you wanted, for extra nitrate removal. Miracle Mud, some people agree with it, some people don't, but if you subscribe to the methodology of Miracle Mud, there are advantages there as well. If you subscribe to that methodology, that is. But the sequential harvesting is the biggest thing. So it's not like it's either feast or famine. People have got around organic carbon dosing, which I'll go over later, by putting their organic carbon on a dosing pump or using biopellets, so it's constantly available. Refugiums, a lot of people have struggled with, well, I had all this algae and I had really low nitrate and phosphate levels, and then I went and harvested my refugium, cut it back by 97%, whatever ridiculous amount they cut it back by, and all of a sudden my nitrate and phosphate spiked. What happened? It was going so well. Well, you've just removed 80% of the biomass of your macroalgae in your refugium. Of course you're going to get a nitrate and phosphate spike, because there's physically not enough cellular mass there. There's not enough biomass there to remove the nitrate and phosphate. So sequential harvesting allows you to, say, harvest a 10 centimetre strip a day or a week or every 3 days or whatever it might be. Cut that back to a centimetre or two below, and let the light get to those lower levels, and keep those lower levels healthy, and regrow that. And then in 3 or 4 days you harvest the next strip, and the next strip, and the next strip, and the next strip. And that way you don't get an overgrowth of macroalgae, and you keep your light penetration within the refugium really good. Make sure that all those lower levels are getting light. You're making sure that you're inspecting the lower levels of the refugium, so you're not getting build up pockets of detritus and so forth that are going to cause you problems later on down the track. You can obviously inspect for pests like bristleworms and things like that. So that's the advantage of it, as well as obviously the advantage of rotifers, copepods, and all sorts of other cryptic zone theories and everything like that you're going to have within a refugium. So stick to that 20%. Make sure that your water flow isn't too turbulent. Get the right light. Like, if you're going to have a 500 litre aquarium and you're going to have all of this coral in there that not only is going to cost you thousands of dollars to put in to begin with, but is going to be worth exponentially more than that by the time it grows out. And your refugium is the sole export system that you have for nitrate and phosphate, and is what the rest of your coral coloration and health hinges on to grow. Don't go and buy a 6500 Kelvin bloody spotlight from Bunnings and cheap out. You will see everywhere on every single marine aquarium forum. You don't need that. Go and spend $40 and get that with the tin light and just replace it every year because it rusts out. I'm sure that you've all seen the studies that have been done with the hyper red lights from Kessel and things like that, and the increasing growth. I think BRS TV Investigates did a study on that. Spend the money on something decent and the right spread, and your success will skyrocket. The right tools for the right job is what it comes down to. So algae reactors come into that as well, but it essentially just removes all of the guesswork. You've got an algae reactor, you've got Chaetomorpha or Chaeto, or however you want to pronounce it, in there, or whatever other macroalgae that is you're growing. As long as it's sized correctly and you supplement your iron and everything correctly, everything else is taken care of for you, and it's in a very low footprint, neat little package. The disadvantages obviously being is that you have to buy the reactor, which is a capital cost. You then have to run the reactor with a pump, which is more energy that you need to put into it, rather than using the passive gravity flow of your sump water to run the refugium. So that's the disadvantage that would be from an algae reactor, but essentially it achieves the same thing. Algae turf scrubbers. Now, I can say from seeing a couple of commercial sized algae turf scrubbers that they produce phenomenal results. Absolutely phenomenal results. The problem is that the infrastructure that you need to put them in can be a little bit convoluted in an aquarium style system, because you need to physically pump the water up and trickle it over a fine screen, as you know, or as you may not know. Essentially, the water trickles over a screen that then turf algae, hair algae, whatever it might be, grows on. And as with your sequential harvesting of your macroalgae, you come along every 2 or 3 days or whatever. You grab a razor blade or a scraper and you scrape a section off, and that allows you to just harvest that and throw it away. The benefit obviously being that this turf algae grows exponentially faster than macroalgae does. The amount of light that's available to it is exponentially higher because it's not having to penetrate water. It's a very thin film of water running over this stuff. The light that's on it is immediately available. There's no diffusion of light. There's no refraction of light. There's none of that. There's no loss of wavelength from depth of water. There's none of that. And they're very, very simple, and that you can visually see when it's getting too overgrown. And they're fairly easy to maintain. If you do have a little bit of a problem with the process, or it gets a bit overgrown, they bounce back very, very quickly. But as I said, you need to elevate it above the level of the sump. Then you've got splashing water and things like that. But in some cases, it does work. There are submerged systems available now. The problem is that to buy an algae turf scrubber, there's not really one on the market that looks good. So when you buy it, you just go, ugh, why didn't I just buy a algae reactor? Because they look like algae reactors look sexy. They look the part. They look like they're doing something. An algae turf scrubber, when you buy it, you just go, oh, I could have just built this myself, and it probably wouldn't have looked that much worse. I'm not banging on, and this is just a couple of the sort of backyard algae turf scrubber manufacturers that I've seen over the years, not any recent ones, but over the years, that have attempted to bring it sort of to the masses. And it's essentially been, well, like, I kind of make this myself. It doesn't. They can be a bit messy, is the thing, but incredibly high removal rates, and You can actually directly remove ammonia and nitrite to a certain extent with these as well. These hair algae and turf algae will process ammonia and nitrite directly, as will macroalgae, but just not as at as much of a higher rate. Oh, so but having said that, I could not tell you what the sizing regime of an algae turf scrubber is. I do know that a while ago I got a little bit obsessed with them, um, and was trying to find sizing regimes and you know square centimeter per part per million ammonia or a part per million nitrate and phosphate or blah blah blah. Um, yeah, I know I've got the info somewhere. If anyone's actually interested in it, I'm sure that you could email me and I'd probably be able to dig it up somewhere. I do keep all of my data, but yeah, I couldn't tell you right off the cuff what that would be. Yeah, turf scrubbers are XCAS. Yeah, for the commercially available ones, they are, and for ones that work. The problem that I have, and you will, if you watched my protein skimmer Q&A, which apparently it's a trigger for me, there is no standardization of sizing for protein skimmers within the aquarium industry. And that goes for um, a lot of other reactors and filtration, like algae turf scrubbers, like algae reactors and things like that. You know, it's in order for you to be able to say this is the volume you have, this is the size system you need. Why is that? And this is kind of what we're trying to dispel with these Q and A's: is we have more information than we realise. Let's use the empirical data to actually try and size something a little bit more reliably, so that you're not wasting your money on something. Um, so that's the problem I have with algae turf scrubbers. To a certain extent, that's the problem I have with other filtration devices as well. Um, Not so much with protein skimmers or fractionators because I know how to size them, but that's the problem I have with the majority of protein skimmers on the market. That oh yeah, this will do a 300 litre aquarium because it's 20% smaller than all the competitors, but we put in 4 times the amount of air and that makes up for it. No, it doesn't. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't. There's only so much air that you can put in until it's a waste. So yeah, it's using the knowledge that you have available to you in order to develop the best possible outcome for yourself. But if anyone's interested in that, email me. I'll try and dig it up for you. Okay, organic carbon-driven systems. Anyone that knows me, anyone that's talked to me, anyone that has ever spoken to me about probiotics, will know that organic carbon-driven systems are my forte. They are an organic system where you're either artificially or naturally introducing organic carbon, and organic carbon will come from waste as well. There was actually a company, Landling Aquaculture in Norway, I believe, that recently did a study that I have actually seen a few white papers on this process before, of using fish sludge and fermenting it and breaking it down into volatile fatty acids to then feed into a denitrification reactor instead of using methanol or ethanol. So using the fish waste to fuel denitrification after processing that fish waste, essentially closing the loop, right? So it can be done. Sizing is still a little out there, so it was only a pilot plant that they did. But the fact of the matter is that organic matter that you put into the system will fuel denitrification by supplying organic carbon once it's broken down. Whether you can utilize all the organic carbon that's locked up in that solid waste, or you physically have enough in there and haven't removed it before it has a chance to exist within the system, is another question. Most often, the answer to that question is no, you will not have enough. Even if you left all of it in there, you'd have more problems than nitrate and phosphate to begin with. If you left all of it in there, but if you had all of it in there, you still wouldn't be able to sequester enough organic carbon out of it to get enough denitrification and phosphate removal. Organic carbon-driven systems can be either aerobic or anaerobic, as you would have remembered by watching the probiotic stream, and denitrification via assimilatory denitrification, which is incorporating nitrate and phosphate into the cell structure, or dissimilatory denitrification, which is breaking it down into nitrogen gas. Okay. Nitrate removal happens with organic carbon in both aerobic and anaerobic environments, so assimilatory and dissimilatory denitrification. So denitrification within like a deep sand bed or in your live rock is dissimilatory denitrification. It's taking organic carbon, it's taking nitrate as an oxygen donor, or as an oxygen source. It's breaking off the O2 out of it, and it's eventually breaking it down through different processes into nitrogen gas, which then gases off. Yeah, you're going to get a certain amount of nitrate removal via that process. Okay. You then have assimilatory denitrification, which is using organic carbon as well, but it's taking nitrate and phosphate, incorporating that into the cell structure to make more cells, and then you're harvesting those cells of bacteria off via your protein skimmer. Okay. Now, in both cases, you are almost always organic carbon limited, which means that you don't have enough organic carbon within your system to physically remove the amount of nitrate and phosphate within the system that you have, so that you can get low enough nutrient levels for your coral and things to thrive. Yeah. So you have to add organic carbon to the system. Now, I'm a big fan of biopellets. They self-regulate themselves, and they're very reliable. They're very predictable in their operation, as is NO3PF4X, or NOPOX, as a lot of people know it as. Anyone that's listened to my streams previously will know that although I have no affiliation with Red Sea, I am a huge fan of NO3PF4X. It is probably one of the most brilliant products that I have seen on the aquarium market. Hands down. Hands down. Especially for nutrient removal. It's so well engineered, that product, that it works the way it says it will work predictively every single time. Every time, without fail. You can even watch as you become nitrate limited, and you still have phosphate in there. If you add a nitrogen source and there's still NO3PF4X in the system that's giving excess organic carbon, you can physically track the reduction of phosphate as you add nitrogen back to the system. It's a remarkable product, absolutely remarkable product. Very easy to gauge, very easy to use. Anyone looking to get into organic carbon without mixing up their own VSV or going into biopellets with all that extra stuff that you have to buy, go and get NOPOX. I highly recommend it. It's a brilliant product. So the other options are VSV, or commonly aquaculture systems will dose ethanol or methanol into their system to fuel denitrification. VSV, vodka, sugar, vinegar. I know people that just use vinegar to great effect, to very great effect, in fact, and it's incredibly cheap. It is theorized that it doesn't fuel cyanobacteria growth as much either. The concept behind vodka, vinegar, sugar dosing is that vodka being ethanol, sugar being sucrose, glucose, and vinegar being acetic acid offer different types of organic carbon supplements to cater to a wider range of bacteria. Now, look, if you're removing nitrate and phosphate, and you're adding a probiotic bacterial mix, at the end of the day, they might prefer it. They might not have to work as hard, but at the end of the day, as long as there's available organic carbon there, they are going to eat it. I don't know how important it is. A varied diet, when you're talking about more complex life forms like us, like plants, things like that is important. Corals, for example, but when we're talking about bacteria, it's not really. I mean, you will get, dominant species developing, which is where doing water changes and adding probiotic bacteria. Excuse me, I might have to switch to coffee here in a minute. Adding those sort of things will definitely help you, but one source of organic carbon versus three sources of organic carbon, you know, and you've got all this organic carbon floating around from all the different foods that you're adding that, you know, arguably is offering a much wider range of organic carbon sources with volatile fatty acids and all sorts of stuff that's coming out of them that I don't think it's really worth it. It's the process and the enzymatic catalysts that make the difference, and that's where NoPox shines. But vinegar can be used to great effect. Ethanol can be used to great effect. Sugar, not so much. But for instance, in biofloc systems and in ponds, in aquaculture, they use molasses, which is a sugar source, which a complex carbohydrate, mind you, but a sugar source and a carbohydrate source nonetheless to fuel denitrification and nutrient reduction and to regulate biofloc. So yeah, it's all of those three options work. Now, organic carbon driven systems will be regulated by the Redfield ratio. Now, the Redfield ratio for bacteria is different to that of phytoplankton. It's been theorized at something like 50 to 10 to 1, down to 20 to 10 to 1. I actually have to talk, Julian, if you're watching, I need to talk to you about this because, as I understand it, Julian and Ihsan have quite a bit of knowledge through Triton in regards to organic carbon ratios for bacterially driven nitrate and phosphate reduction systems in aquaria that I would be very interested in talking to them about. And I would recommend that if any of you are wondering about that, and especially if you're using the Triton method and getting your ICP tests and NDOC tests done, or if you're not, I definitely recommend that you start because it's an incredible resource that people should be utilizing. That you give them a call. We have a brilliant resource here in Australia available now, to the point where we at Pure Aquatics have now engaged the help of Triton to offer ICP and NDOC testing for nutrient profiling and water chemistry profiling for our aquaculture customers to allow people to see metabolic deficiencies in their water, to get a better idea of what's going on with their water, to get a better idea of what's going on with their incoming water, so they know how to treat it to get the best water going into their aquaculture system. It doesn't only cross into aquariums. So yeah, that's even we have started to push the envelope a little bit with that. So definitely something to talk about with those guys. Jason G. Oh, this is a good one. Does Marine Pure Block reduce nitrates? Simple answer, unequivocally yes, it does. And it is reliant on organic carbon availability, obviously, as all denitrification is, whether it's aerobic or anaerobic. Marine Pure balls will reduce nitrates. The thing you got to remember is nitrification itself will only occur when there's oxygen present. And unless you're flogging incredible amounts of flow with incredibly high oxygen levels through the Marine Pure balls, you're not going to get total penetration of oxygen-rich water at even flow rates through the block or through the ball or any other type of the Marine Pure style of product evenly. So you get nitrification in the outer layers, but then it very quickly turns into denitrification on the inner layers. And that's where your oxygen-free zones occur, and where, or anaerobic zones, I should say, oxygen-deficient zones occur, which is where nitrate is taken and converted via different biological processes and enzymatic breakdown to nitrogen gas. And yeah, yep, unequivocally yes. I've tried it many times. I've seen it done many times. You can do it with gravel. You can do it with anything like that. It's the application that you apply it in and the way that you maintain it. Now, the advantage Marine Pure has is that it's been engineered to not block, or not block as much. Everything will block. Like if I was to put Marine Pure into an aquaculture application without filtering at 10 microns, I'd be throwing it out after 6 months. It will just eventually block. But aquaculture is a completely different application to an aquarium system. Aquaculture application has significantly higher suspended solids loads, and significantly higher bacterial loads. So the bacterial slough, the biofilm growth, and the solids loading would mean that Marine Pure would unfortunately be unsuitable, because it doesn't self-clean. Whereas in an aquarium application, you have enough flow going through there that anything that gets caught in there will slough off eventually, and you can take it out and give it a bit of a whack through with water in a bucket or something like that and get most of the waste out. That's the advantage it has. So you don't have to worry about having to maintain a bucket of tightly packed gravel with, you know, a low flow rate or anything like that. You just get the block, chuck it in, it pretty much self-regulates itself because of the design of it and the size of it. Do I wrote Cyperax for the process of denitrification, for the purposes of denitrification, I assume you mean. Cyperax, now, if you go to the Sur Media website, you will notice on their articles and blog post page that there is a write up there about usable surface area that I actually did for Sur Media, in regards to specific surface area and usable surface area. Now, Cyperax and all those types of sintered glass medias boast a very, very high surface area, but because the pores are that small, they become clogged really quickly and become unusable, and the surface area on the outside is really all that's available. You have to, as I said, filter to incredibly fine rates to make that surface area available. That's why Marine Pure shines, because it essentially self-cleans and self-regulates the denitrification process for you. That's really what the success of Marine Pure is, or other medias that are similar to Marine Pure. So, yeah, Cyperax, do I rate it when it's using the right application? Yeah. Is there better media that will do the job? Is there media that will do the job better? And is there better media that doesn't have the fallbacks of Cyperax? Definitely. So Cyperax is a very old school product. Old school product. Back in the day, it probably would have been great. But yeah. Now, given what we know, there are better products out there. Right tool for the job. Again, choose the right tool for the job. Is that why sponge is used as the main media in pond canisters? Easy to clean. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. But with easy to clean means bigger pores, which means more waste gets through, which means, it's not cleaning it as well. But with finer stuff means that you have to clean it more often, or you have to automate your cleaning process by a drum filter or something like that. So yeah, it's 6 to 1, half a dozen of the other. Absorption media. Okay, so we should probably talk about nitrate absorption media first. So let's dispel some myths first. Nitrate absorption media, some companies will sell zeolite as nitrate absorption media, and when you get down to brass tacks, it's reducing nitrate by reducing the initial ammonia load. It's not actually removing nitrate at all. So is that actively reducing nitrate? No. Is it passively reducing nitrate by physically reducing the amount of stuff that can be turned into nitrate? Yes. Then you've got nitrate media like Seachem selenitrate media, which is essentially a anaerobic media. Any media can be used in an anaerobic environment to produce denitrification. I'll get to that. To produce denitrification within a system. Whether or not it will do it well is another question. So things that will actively, what you want is if you're looking for an absorption media to absorb nitrate, you want something that is going to work on an ion exchange process with the nitrate ion specifically. Okay. Things will do that. I know Brightwell Aquatics have one. I know Continuum, I think, have one. There's a few bits and pieces around that have it. Nitrate FX, Jason, I'm not familiar with the product. I'm pretty sure Purigen doesn't remove nitrate, but I haven't seen any empirical data to either prove or disprove that. Macropore, again, haven't seen anything, just that it says, I think it says it removes nitrate. I'd never used it, but I would be asking, if I was a discerning hobbyist, I would be asking of myself and of that company, what is the process at which it removes nitrate? Does it specifically target the nitrate ion? And what is the data that you can show me that proves that? That is what I would be asking. That's absorption media. That's not media that can be used in a denitrification environment to produce denitrification. It's absorption media that specifically removes just the nitrate ion from the water. Okay, some you can recharge, some you have to throw away. Zeolite, it'll absorb ammonia, it won't absorb nitrate. So we'll reduce the nitrate by absorbing the ammonia before it gets a chance to be, turned into nitrate, as we talked about, but it won't absorb nitrate by itself. Okay, that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. Do your research before you jump in. They can be XY, okay, but in a bind, you can use it. Or if you've got a small nano tank, it's useful, especially if it's rechargeable, rather than put a refugium on, or put a skimmer on, or something like that. You can use these ion selective resins like Purigen or Macropore to absorb all your tannins and things like that. Then you can use a nitrate absorption media to get rid of your nitrate, and a phosphate absorption media like GFL or something to get rid of your phosphate, which brings us on to phosphate absorption media. Now, phosphate absorption media, I'm also going to go into, because I've done organic carbon with nitrate, and there's not really anything you can use else for chemically removing nitrate. Phosphate, however, I will put into this talk about absorption media also lanthanum chloride. Okay, so because it produces a precipitant which is then removed, it's kind of absorption, but it's more binding. Before I continue, what company sells nitrate absorption media? I believe Brightwell Aquatics sell it. I believe Continuum Aquatics sell nitrate absorption media. I don't know of any others. But what you want to look for, Jason, is you want to look for a nitrate absorption media that works on the ion exchange process of the nitrate ion specifically. Any good company that has done their research to create a quality or bring a quality product to market, and bear in mind that a lot of these companies, some of them have developed these products themselves, but a lot of them have taken technology from the wastewater industry or the drinking water industry and adapted that to the aquarium industry. So whether they've done the work themselves or they've adapted that technology or that product to the aquarium industry, there will be data that will show the removal of nitrate in its ionic form of the nitrate ion, NO3, okay? Or as nitrogen ions that incorporate NO3, NO4, NO2, whatever it might be, okay? You want to get that data. they will be able to show you that data. If they say, oh no, that's proprietary information, what, showing me a graph and the chemistry at which it occurs is proprietary information? Can't you just, be a discerning hobbyist? Ask for the information. If you can't get the information, if the people aren't willing to share, and I mean, some of it is product protection, but they can show you bench tests if they've done bench tests, which they would have done if they've done their work properly. They, they will be able to show you the chemistry or the data, even if they have to doctor it and put their own logo on it. It is within their best interest to do that. It's yeah. And if you can't get it, either choose another option for nitrate removal or move on to another product, because you want to be confident that you're spending your money on something that is worth it. If you can get it cheap and you can trial it and it works, great. But if you're going to be paying, for a 50 ml jar, if you're going to be paying $45 for a 50 ml jar, I'd be questioning, like, $45 for a 50 ml jar. I can buy a carton that has 24 375 ml cans in it for $45, and you're wanting to sell me a 50 ml jar of stuff to throw in my aquarium that I can only use once or twice and then I'm going to throw out. Like, I'd be questioning it, and you're entitled to question it as a customer. And if they don't want to give you the info, that's fine, just move on. I'm not saying, but people need to be honest. How most chemical phosphate removal methods reduce alkalinity. I have heard of this. I haven't seen any data on it. I believe lanthanum will reduce phosphate. I'm not sure about granular ferric oxide or aluminium-based phosphate removers, which I'm about to get to. So yeah, I don't quite know the chemistry behind that, but I would be most interested in reading about that. So I might do a little bit of research after I get off. Now, moving on to GFO, granular ferric oxide. There are grades of granular ferric oxide which work, some better than others. It's best used in a fluidized application, so that you can maintain water contact with as many surfaces as possible. It's incredibly good at maintaining low levels, but if you've got a high level of phosphate that you need to rip down, GFO probably isn't the choice for you. There is actual ways of recharging granular ferric oxide as well, if you can be bothered to go through the process, which I believe is using either calcium or sodium hydroxide, both of which are pretty nasty chemicals. So calcium hydroxide obviously being calc, sodium hydroxide being liquid caustic or drain cleaner. That stuff is wildly dangerous, so do not mess around with it. Treat it with respect if you're going to do it. I'm in no way condoning that you go to the process of using harmful chemicals like this to recharge the GFO, but I know it has been done, and I know that you can find the information on Reef Central. It is publicly published. So if you would like, if you type that in, if you type in Reef Central GFO recharging or something along those lines, there's a huge thread over there that was made years ago about doing that, and you can actually recharge GFO and get a certain amount of activity back out of it if you can be bothered to do that. So yes, very good at maintaining lower levels of GFO, not so great at mitigating low levels of GFO, low levels of phosphate. It's been a long week, guys. Low levels of phosphate. If you're looking to rip down high levels of phosphate, there's better things to do it with. Organic carbon being one, because you can really go pretty hard with it, especially if you're supplementing with supplemental nitrate as well, or nitrogen, which I've gone over in the probiotic post, as well as you can find it on my blog, about phosphate removal with organic carbon. And if you were looking to rip down higher levels of phosphate for something that's more aggressive, aluminium or activated alumina, aluminium-based phosphate removals or activated alumina, which you'll most often see as little white ceramic-type balls, are an excellent way of ripping down high levels of phosphate, and it has a very, very large capacity for phosphate removal. It's the old aluminium beastie raising its head again. What if I get aluminium in my tank? What if you get elevated levels of iron in your tank? It's granular ferric oxide. It's granular rust, GFO. What happens if you get elevated levels of iron in your tank? At the end of the day, if you rinse the activated alumina and get the dust out, the amount of aluminum that would be biologically degraded in the time that you had it in the aquarium will be minimal, because there's very specific organisms that need to produce very specific acids and types of enzymes to break that down, or you grind it into dust and then it needs to be broken down anyway. But if you're doing that, you're applying it wrong, and there's a reason for your increased aluminium levels. Will it be harmful? Unlikely. Activated alumina has been used for forever and a day before GFO ever come onto the scene. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with it. So yeah, really good for roofing down higher levels. But again, it's a throwaway item. Activated alumina, as far as I know, you cannot recharge. GFO, as I said, there are ways of recharging it if you so choose to do so. But obviously, take care with those chemicals at your own risk. The rechargeable stuff for phosphate, there are phosphate resins that you can use that are available to be recharged with certain regenerating salts that you can buy. I know Brightwell Aquatics used to have one, or do have one. It's called Phosphate R, which is a resin that you can recharge, I think, up to 5 to 10 times or something with their recharging salt. I'm not familiar with any others, but it certainly hasn't gained the traction that GFO has. Yeah, yeah, just hasn't gained the traction. But it's there. Now, lanthanum chloride. Lanthanum chloride is a liquid. It's used as a pool phosphate remover. Anyone that's used it goes in, makes cloudy water, rips out the phosphate, and if you don't remove it, it then precipitates out into your aquarium. Now, the ways that you can get around that is by injecting it directly into the inlet of the skimmer very, very slowly. A lot of people will put it on a dosing pump so that it is injected slowly over the course of the day for the dose rate that you're putting into the inlet of the protein skimmer, so that the precipitant, which is lanthanum phosphate, I believe, is the precipitant that it creates when it bonds with phosphate, is then it creates a solid, obviously, and it then is stripped out by the protein skimmer by the process of foam fractionation. Other people I've seen have let it settle to the bottom with seawater, and then put it gently into the sump and let the water flow over the top of a jar, and let the lanthanum sort of suck it out as the water flows over it. A very archaic, uncontrolled way of doing it, but it can be done. Yeah, it's just the easiest way is to inject it into the inlet of the skimmer. Now, I have heard, I have no data to prove this, but I have heard that lanthanum is very, very similar in ionic elemental composition to calcium, and at elevated levels, if there is availability of lanthanum, whether it's lanthanum chloride, lanthanum phosphate, whatever other precipitant it would make, within the aquarium, so if you're not ripping it out as you're putting it in, if you overdose and it gets to an elevated level constantly, your corals can actually mistake the lanthanum, or take up the lanthanum, not preferentially, but take it up in conjunction with calcium, because the ions are very similar in their composition, and you can get a buildup of lanthanum within your coral, and it can become toxic to your coral. I got told this by a very knowledgeable person who is very much better at chemistry than I am. I don't have any data to show that, but the process of injecting lanthanum chloride into a very, very expensive marine aquarium makes me somewhat nervous. You will get people that say, I've used it for years and I've never had a problem, blah, 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 blah. That's great. I have no doubt. You're probably doing it very safely. I'm just saying there are safer methods of doing it. calcium triphosphate. Calcium triphosphate with lanthanum. Wouldn't it be lanthanum triphosphate? There's no calcium in the chemistry for calcium triphosphate with the reaction with lanthanum. Anyway, perhaps Andrew will explain that a little bit further. Maybe I'm not reading that comment correctly. Um, so yeah, there are easier ways. The attractiveness of lanthanum chloride is it's cheap. It's really really cheap. If you do have elevated levels of phosphate, it bonds to the calcium. So the lanthanum makes the phosphate bond to the calcium. I'm going to have to read up on the chemistry because I don't understand it, just for my own interest. But yeah, anyone who's interested in it should research it a little better before using it, as they should any nutrient export process that they're going to use. Yeah, as I said, it's cheap, but if it's used properly, it can be effectiveness. It can be effective. So, um, okay, right. So we talked about organic carbon and native organic carbon that comes from food and waste. The next thing we'll talk about is passive bacterial-driven systems like deep sand beds and aerobic media. We've been over Marine Pure. And this is specifically in regards to nitrate removal. Phosphate removal doesn't really happen anaerobically. It's the only bacterial-driven export system that happens is aerobic or assimilatory denitrification, which also incorporates phosphorus removal, like with biopellets or organic carbon, where it's taking in the nitrate and phosphate and creating cell mass. So passive bacterial-driven systems like deep sand beds, anaerobic media, inside your live rock, that's all happening with denitrifying bacteria in an anaerobic environment. Miracle mud or mineral mud, yes, again, yep, that's a denitrification system as well. Very similar to an activated sludge type of process in wastewater. And these all happen with native organic carbon supplements in normal passive bacterial-driven systems. Or if you supplement organic carbon, you can accelerate that in a anaerobic system like a deep sand bed, miracle mud, anaerobic media like Marine Pure, etc., etc. Excuse me. So, yeah, we've been over organic carbon-driven systems. Generally speaking, the passive bacterial-driven system is your backbone of your nitrate removal, and then you have to enhance upon that to get a net positive gain in nitrate removal and produce, sub 1 part per million or sub 5 part per million results, or whatever it is that you're targeting for your nitrate levels within your system. We've been over that enough. We don't need to go over that again. Algae reactors we've been over as well. So it's yeah. I don't think we need to go over that any further. The one thing I did want to add that we will that I'll go over, and anyone that is tuned in and listening afterwards, we're going to have. We usually have to wrap up for the last 15-20 minutes. It's getting on to nearly 2 hours that we've been on now. We usually wrap up at about 10 o'clock unless the conversation's really lively. We haven't got Bruce Newell in the house tonight though, so I don't know how lively it's going to be. But if you're watching this afterwards, Bruce, we missed you on the live stream, mate. But the thing with nutrient removal is choose a nutrient removal path and stick to it. If you trying to mesh together all of these different systems thinking that, well, one's good, so if I do 5 different things, it's going to be really good. It's not necessarily the case, and often is detrimental to the removal process. So, for instance, there is a certain synergy between, say, refugium / algae reactors and GFO, because nitrate is predominantly taken up by the macroalgae with a little bit of phosphate, and then there's all this glut of phosphate left over. So you add a little bit of GFO, which, as I mentioned, is good at maintaining lower levels consistently of phosphate because it rips it out a little bit of it rips it out a little bit at a time. So we they work very well synergistically together because you have leftover phosphate. Because oftentimes the refugium isn't sized correctly, as we've spoken about. Speak the truth. I'm not sure what you mean, Andy. Can you explain? Um, so they work very synergistically together. But if you had, say, GFO or activated alumina, and you were running an organic carbon driven system, so you were adding organic carbon to fuel your nitrate and phosphate removal, and you're then putting a phosphate removal media in there, absorption media in there, you're going to be messing up your Redfield ratio. So you'll get it all sorted out, all fine, everything's fine and dandy. And then you go and add GFO in there because, oh, my phosphate levels are too high and my nitrate levels are zero. I'll add GFO in there, it'll rip the phosphate down, but then all of a sudden you get a nitrate spike again because you've thrown out your Redfield ratio. It's one, understanding the process. So if you understand organic carbon driven systems, you know that you need, for instance, 50 parts per million of organic carbon to 10 parts per million nitrate to 1 part per million phosphate. And if you have enough organic carbon in there and you have no nitrate and you have elevated levels of phosphate, if you add nitrate back, you'll get a reduction in phosphate. And then if both of those nitrate and phosphate reductions slow down, you know that you need to add more organic carbon to remove those as well. It's a ratio. It works very reliably. If you go and add a phosphate absorption media that is ripping out phosphate and messing up that ratio, you're constantly going to be fighting a losing battle in trying to balance out that relationship and balance out that system. Not so much with passive denitrification like marine pure and things like that, because generally speaking, once they're established, they maintain their production and removal quite consistently, so that then you can balance other systems on top of it. But the main thing to remember is the main thing to remember is research what you're going to be doing, understand the system, understand the process, and then apply it in a way that's going to give you the best result. And in a way, that's what these Q&As are trying to demystify. They're trying to demystify sizing, application, trying to get you the knowledge that you need to produce results for yourself. I carbon dosed and had a fuge. The macro died, obviously. I stopped the carbon dosing and stuck to the fuge. Sticking to one path is best. Yes, well, definitely, exactly what we just went over. So sticking to one path is best. As I said, people have a refugium and they start dosing organic carbon. Yeah, that's another example. They have a refugium and they start dosing organic carbon. The organic carbon is that aggressive at removing the nitrate and phosphate that, because the refugium and the macroalgae is a lot slower because it's a growing plant, once it's established, it's good. But you need to keep maintaining it, and that's the disadvantage of a refugium. You need to keep maintaining it on a consistent basis to make sure that you don't get dips and hollows in your removal, and also that your reduction of your nitrate and phosphate and the production of biomass of macroalgae remains consistent. Once it's established, it rips it out. The biomass is at a critical mass where it's ripping it out as it's produced, because you have enough in there to process the amount that's flowing past the refugium. Whereas heterotrophic bacteria, they double in population every 15 to 30 minutes. So you can achieve a massive reduction in a very short period of time with an organic carbon-driven system, which is why most people experience exactly what Andy experienced, where his refugium died because it got physically starved of nitrate and phosphate because of his organic carbon dosing. Pick a path, stick to it, and you'll have much, much more success with nutrient removal. So, takeaways from tonight: understand the process that you're trying to treat, which is nutrient removal, nitrate and phosphate. understand what affects the production of nitrate and phosphate, which is filtration, nitrification, removal of mechanical filtration, and then you're removing what's left over. Then understand the ways that you can remove it, pick a path, and then follow it, and don't try and hybridize something or reinvent the wheel, because honestly, it's been done. So you can rely on it. But the more you understand, the better it will operate. And sometimes too much of a good thing can be bad. So yeah, don't get too carried away. Try not to take it too seriously either and let it stress you out. Let things happen over time. You'll have a lot more fun doing it. I'd much rather having a fish tank that I don't have to have my hands in all the time, that I can just sit back on the lounge or whatever and have a quiet beer and watch it and relax and enjoy it, rather than having to maintain it all the time because I'm constantly chasing my tail, making more work for myself. So yeah, although I don't have a tank at the moment, but life's a little bit busy at the moment. I don't really have time for a tank. So that's a good thing. Oh, I've got to take those glasses off. Okay. I think I've blabbered on for enough. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Open floor. Any hilarious stories? Anyone got anything exciting planned for the weekend? It's currently pouring torrential rain here, so unfortunately I won't be able to mow the lawn this weekend. That's a tragedy. Yeah, yeah, Andy. Roller mats with PF4 reduction, because you're physically getting the solid waste and then removing it almost immediately, or removing it from the system so it doesn't have a chance to break down into waste that is then going to contribute to both nitrate and phosphate. So yes, definitely. Yep. You can draw that correlation now. Forgive me, mate, for being a bit off topic, but what's your thoughts on Flourish XL for fresh water? Flourish XL, that is the glutyl hydrate, or the glutyl aldehyde, or whatever it is, for organic carbon dosing in the place of CO2. Is that what it is, Jason? I believe. I'm pretty sure it is. So there's two ways that that plants can access carbon for photosynthesis. And plants use inorganic carbon in the form of carbon dioxide, not organic carbon in the form of, you know, ethanol or anything like that we talked about for our bacterial driven systems, right? So completely different product. Do not ever use XL in a marine tank to drive a bacterial driven nutrient reduction system. Don't do it. Disclaimer, big time. I don't know why I feel I need to say that, but I've been asked the question. No, don't do it. The application of so plants can derive CO2 in two main ways. It's either via CO2 from the air, or injecting CO2 gas into your aquarium, or from carbonates. If you have a KH level that's above 30 to 50 parts per million, you can get plants to thrive fairly well without having to artificially lower that pH. They'll be able to access the carbon photosynthesis, but they might not grow as well because a lot of the nutrients are more available at a lower pH than they are at a higher. And if you're not lowering it artificially with CO2, you've got carbon in there from KH, but the elevated KH will increase your pH, and you see where I'm going with it, right? Glutyl aldehyde or its derivatives or related chemicals, essentially those XL type organic carbons, they work incredibly well. They work really well for accelerating freshwater growth of freshwater plants. But there's a lot more that's required to make your freshwater plants thrive. It's not the silver bullet. Oh, I've got a cichlid tank at pH 9, and I want to grow. I don't want to put CO2 in because I want, my Tanganyika and cichlids to have a really high pH, but I want to grow plants. I'll put in XL, and that's all I need to put in. No, it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. So It is a brilliant tool. It is an established product. It's again a predictable product, just like Nopox is for another process, obviously, but it's an established and predictable product. It does work. The work has been done there to develop the product. I have no qualms in using it myself, and I have no qualms in saying that yes, it will work for the purposes of supplementary carbon for your plants. So yeah, I trust it. If you want a kick-ass aquarium, however, and you really want to push the envelope, do it properly with some plant-specific soils, and do your aquascape and whatever. But then run a higher KH with like potassium hydroxide or potassium bicarbonate or something like that. Run a higher KH and then lower your pH with CO2. It'll mean that your pH remains stable. You've got KH in there for your nitrification, but adding the CO2 creates carbonic acid, which lowers the pH, and the CO2 gas is then available for photosynthesis, and that's where you get all your good pearling and stuff from. So, and your enhanced growth and enhanced uptake of nutrient at that lower pH as well. So yeah, yes, but it can be better. But you know, there's all these products that are available to boost your success rates in aquarium keeping. Any other questions? No worries, Jason. Not a problem at all. Does anyone have any other questions, comments, disagreements, challenges to my information? I'm always willing to learn. Anything that I might be interested in that you've come across? No worries at all, Brett. You know I'm available on the phone at any time, mate. And when you get that gear, even if it's after breakup, we break up on the 21st. But please don't hesitate to call me if you're in a bind over the Christmas break and you need a little bit of guidance. I'm more than happy to take a phone call from you. If I don't get to you straight away, I will give you a call back. Just leave me a message or send me a text. Okay? You've got all my information on email, so just feel free if you need to. Yeah. Anyone else got any questions? Tricalcium diphosphate can form from lanthanum. Tricalcium diphosphate can form from lanthanum. Okay. I will look into that. Andy, thanks very much. I usually get a gut load of questions after I'm finished, and none today. It is the end of the year. Everyone's tired. I'm tired. I'm sure you all are too. It's been a year, definitely. I'm ready for it to be over. All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, comments, or lively banter, I think I'm going to end it there because I have to get up and help a mate early on in the morning to go and do a repair on something. So, thank you all for coming along. I really appreciate your support this year. So does Paul and everyone within the industry, especially our store owners. Thanks very much for being involved in the hobby. And Merry Christmas. And I hope everyone stays safe over the Christmas break. Remember, we're still battling with this pandemic and coronavirus, so it's very important that we all Still try and abide by those rules, especially if we're traveling. Make sure you carry hand sanitizer with you and just be a little bit sensible. I hope to see you all in the new year. As I said, if anyone has any questions for me, my phone number is on the Pure Aquatics website, as well as on the contact us section. That's my phone number. As well as you can get in contact with me via the sales@pureaquatics.com.au email address if you need. And yeah, I hope everyone has a safe and happy Christmas, especially if you're traveling. Please drive safe. And we'll see you next year. Thanks very much. See you, Zoe. See you, Matt. See you, Andy. See you, everyone. Bye.